a cup of coffee, sit back and listen to Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life features stories to inspire and motivate you. Live your best life now. Listen, learn, think, and decide. Change your attitude, change your life. Visit cyacyl.com.
Welcome to Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. I'm JoAnn Herman. Thanks for tuning in. The last time you renewed your driver's license, did you check the box that says organ donor? Polls suggest that most Americans believe in organ donation, but only a minority are signed up to be donors. Meanwhile, the demand for organ donations is soaring. More than 115,000 Americans currently need life-saving organ transplants, and a new name is added to the National Organ Transplant waiting list every 10 minutes. Today's guest, Suzanne Ruff's mother and two sisters, as well as several aunts, uncles, and cousins, have all needed kidney transplants to save their lives. While Suzanne's mother and sister, Janice, received their transplants from strangers, when her other sister, JoAnn, got sick, Suzanne decided to be the donor. During the time that passed between the day she made the offer and the actual surgery, Suzanne considered backing out several times, but through faith and courage, she faced her extreme fears and eventually went through with the surgery. Suzanne is here today to discuss the importance of organ donation and to share the perspective of someone who has offered a life-saving gift. Suzanne is the author of the book, The Reluctant Donor. She's a member of the National Kidney Foundation's Living Donor Council Executive Committee and a freelance writer who was a contributor to the book, Chicken Soup for the Soul, Grieving and Recovery. Welcome, Suzanne. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
Suzanne, we are delighted to have you here to discuss this very important topic, organ donation. So I'm very happy that you're here. Suzanne, I said in the introduction, so many of your family members experienced the need to have a kidney transplant. What was it that was going on in your family history that caused this to happen?
My family has inherited a genetic disease called Polycystic Kidney Disease, PKD.
And so what is PKD and why does that lead to organ transplants?
Poly means many, so many cysts cover the kidney and eventually choke the kidney, causing them to fail. 10% of the people that have PKD never develop the disease. There are two forms of PKD, AD-PKD, autosomal dominant PKD, and AR-PKD, which affects infants. Our family has a ferocious case of AD-PKD.
Now, what about you, Suzanne? You obviously made this life-changing decision to be your sister's donor. Are you safe? Is there ever the risk that you may develop this condition?
At my age now, I am 60 years old now, and I will not develop PKD. I had to go through a lot of testing to be sure that I wouldn't. But at this point, I did not inherit the gene. That's been established. The reason that I was so afraid was because when we learned that it was a hereditary disease back in the 1960s, we did not know whether or not we had all inherited the disease, so we were tested, and at the time, 3 out of 4 of us did have PKD, but our parents told us that none of us had PKD. They lied to us, and they did that to protect us. Obviously, it boomeranged and backfired.
Suzanne, what made you decide to offer a kidney to your sister?
Well, I believe in organ donation, obviously. My mother and both my sisters received kidneys from deceased donors, but I always thought I would be a dead donor, never a living donor. The reason I went through with it is because I knew what my sister's life would be like because I watched my mom suffer from the disease. She was on dialysis 10 years, but was extremely blessed to receive a kidney on St. Patrick's Day. And we are an Irish Catholic family from the south side of Chicago, and they dyed the river green in Chicago on St. Patrick's Day. Mm-hmm. And my mother received her transplant from a 42-year-old man who died and was generous enough to be an organ donor. So I saw what she went through. We have a very strong Catholic faith in our family, and my mother said, if you can't believe in miracles, when you see that she received that kidney on St. Patrick's Day, she said, you have to be crazy not to believe in miracles, but I knew what my sister faced. The only thing was I really hated hospitals. I don't think anybody likes to be in the hospital. I'm not unique. But I had seen so many people from my family die. We've had 8 deaths from PKD, and they were the people I loved the most. And so I associated hospitals with death, and I'm like the cowardly lion in The Wizard of Oz. So I didn't know if I would ever find the courage to be a donor, a living donor.
So when you approached your sister with the idea of you being the donor, what was her reaction? What did she say to you at that moment?
She had collapsed and was in critical condition in the hospital, and our mother had died a few months before she collapsed, and my sister and I weren't getting along because she was crabby and irritable, and I told everyone she had turned into a big poop. Mm-hmm. And I realized later it was because she was sick, and I always say that illness brings us to our knees. And when I called her in the hospital, I blurted out that I would give her one of my kidneys, and she said to me, "No, you need to be tested. We need to find out whether or not you have polycystic kidney disease," because of the fact that we were told that we didn't have PKD, and in fact she did have it. So she said right away, "No, and you're not brave enough," because she knows me really well.
So you made the decision, Suzanne. You told your sister you wanted to do this. And how much time now transpired between that moment and the actual surgery?
About 8 months for me to go through the tests, and we had genetic testing. And through those 8 months, I was put on a good front with her. But with my husband, I collapsed, and I kept saying, "I can't do it, I can't do it." And I actually told her, or had a moment where I told myself that I'm going to tell her I changed my mind. And I did think about telling her I changed my mind, but I never did. And she told me over and over again I could always change my mind, I could change my mind. But there was a moment I had where I knew that was what I was meant to do. And I really, really and truly believe that there's a reason I wasn't given PKD. And people always say, "PK what?" because no one has heard of the disease. And yet it's it's the most common genetic disease. So I feel like I was meant to tell our family stories because they're incredible little God winks in our life. That's what I call them. They're like coincidences. My mom called them miracles. I call them God winks. And I think it led to what I was supposed to do, and that was to save my sister's life.
You mentioned before that you were Catholic. I'm Catholic as well. What was the role of faith? I would assume there was a lot of praying that went on during those 8 months.
Well, we are definitely Irish Catholic, and my mother's sister was a Roman Catholic nun, but we have a great sense of humor in our family, and she was not your typical nun. And when she was diagnosed with PKD in the 1960s, she was told that there was a new treatment called dialysis, but there weren't enough machines for everyone, and there was a waiting list. So she decided that she did not want to put her name on the waiting list because she didn't want to take the place of someone who might have a family, and she also didn't want the convent to spend the exorbitant amount of money it costs to save her life. I still get choked up about it to think of her courage because I was 13 years old, and she died when I graduated from 8th grade, and a week after my graduation. But my mother left her side to come home for my graduation, and my aunt wanted her to give me her gift, and it was a gift of a typewriter, which was extravagant in those days. So I feel like the courage that she had she was 45 years old, and she died a week after my graduation. And in fact, 2 years later, her brother, my uncle, was one of those people she described who had a family and needed dialysis, and he did go on dialysis. He was the first one in the family.
Suzanne, you mentioned that during those 8 months, you were obviously having second thoughts, and you started to feel that this was your purpose. We're talking about organ donation, but this is a great lesson because people are confronted with challenges every day. People have fears that they need to face every day. whether it be organ donation or overcoming some other type of obstacle. How did you work your way through those fears? What advice can you offer to someone to face their fears?
The book is not only about disease, it is exactly about what you're asking me. And the reason I was able to face my fear was because of my faith, but also I swam all the time. I went swimming almost every day to just work out my frustration. I have, I should say, a husband who is a rock, and he developed a mantra because I'd say to him, I just can't do it. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and say, I can't do it. And he'd say, well, you don't have to do it today. That was his mantra. No kidney giving today. All you have to do is go to work today. And so having a support system, but looking deep inside myself to find the courage, it's there. It's within anyone who has to do anything hard. You just have to face your fear and sort of draw the line in the sand and step over it. And I really thought I was going to die. I don't know why. I just thought that I just don't like hospitals. Mm-hmm. But I just knew that I had to do this. And it was really turned out to be the most incredible thing I've ever done because I faced my fears. But my sister is just nice again. She's a joy.
Suzanne, I think that's a great place for us to take a break for this week's Good Life Tips. Stay with us for information to help you make the positive life changes that we talk about on this show. When we return, I will continue my conversation with Suzanne Ruff. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. I'm JoAnn Herman, and our guest today is Suzanne Ruff, author of the book, The Reluctant Donor. Suzanne, about your book, The Reluctant Donor, Dr. Sanjay Gupta, CNN chief medical correspondent, says, if you want to be inspired, simply turn the page. Do you see yourself as an inspiration to others?
No, I really don't. I hope I think my family's stories will inspire people. I think my family, if you know what an incredible family my mother had, and you read that and you see, that's where the inspiration comes from. And that's who inspired me.
So, Suzanne, what was the actual surgery like? What happened, and what could someone that might be contemplating making this life-saving gift expect to experience?
Well, what I most remember was the morning of the surgery. I walked across the street from the hotel to the hospital, and there was a group of joggers, and I wanted to just join them and run away. But I obviously had to be at the hospital before my sister, and she came early and was standing at the desk when I walked in the hospital, and she was all choked up, and she said, I didn't think you'd be here, because she knows me so well. And I said, well, I haven't done it yet. But the surgery went smoothly. We are very, very blessed. I know there is a risk of rejection, but she's been doing fantastic, and it's been 9 years, not quite 9 years. And the surgery went well, and I remember my daughters and my husband were there, and they said, boy, you've given life 3 times. And I never realized that until that moment. But it wasn't as bad as I thought, but it wasn't easy either. And I as much as I talk about organ donation, I stress that I never am pushing anyone to be a living donor. It's a very personal decision. But I do stress that if you do have a sudden or unexpected death, to be an organ donor in that event is one of the greatest things you can do for your fellow man, the most noble thing. My younger sister received a kidney from a 12-year-old girl, and I can't imagine the courage that it took that family to donate her organs to save my sister's life.
We're talking about after-death donation, but living donations, as you did, a kidney or bone marrow, or even something as simple as a blood donation can save another person's life. So if you want to do something, start off slow, donate blood, and work your way up to a larger donation.
That's wonderful advice. It truly is. Giving blood is we had to give blood often for our mother. She had developed antibodies, and it is truly a painless and easy thing to do and a wonderful help.
Suzanne, for someone who may be contemplating organ donation, how do you advise them to educate themselves? What resources are available that they can tap into?
Well, they can go to the UNOS website, a government website, unos.org, or the National Kidney Foundation website, and they can read about organ donation there. The pkdcure.org is also a good website for anyone with polycystic kidney disease. But your state DMV office, too, if you sign up, you can sign up online. But if you want to read the most comprehensive information about organ donation, I love the UNOS website. I think today I looked before we talked, and there's over 116,800 now waiting for a transplant, and 90,000 of those names are needing a kidney transplant.
Well, and as I said in the introduction, by the time this interview is over, 2 more people will have been added to that list. So, the numbers are growing and the demand is growing. Suzanne, I know you said earlier you never want to talk someone into doing this, and I never want to talk anyone into doing this, but how does it feel to have had the opportunity to save another person's life?
It has completely changed me. We have a joke in our family, my sisters and I, when we say when we wake up in the morning, if you wake up in the morning and you can pee, it's going to be a great day. But we just, in order to put into words the miracle of it, because of my age, I have seen the incredible progress made in organ transplantation. Obviously, I hope that we'll find a cure for PKD and people won't have to be living donors for polycystic kidney disease, but it is truly one of the greatest things that we've accomplished in science to be able to save another person's life, and it changes you. You just have a greater appreciation for life.
I would assume, like you've been saying, growing up with so much illness and having had such a profound experience, you probably have a different outlook on life than so many of us do, that you appreciate the little things so much more.
Oh, it's all about the little things, basically, when it comes right down to it. But having a genetic disease in your family, there's a psychological aspect of it that is just so hard to put into words. But my sisters and I joke that we right now are enjoying the fun side of it. And I think it's because you do appreciate every single moment of every day in a more exaggerated way. And it's just a beautiful way to live every day, and we all should be living that way every day. But it took this for me to really get to that point.
And I think that's, if people don't walk away with anything else from this interview, I hope that's it, because I think so many of us spend the majority of our time focusing on what's wrong, what's missing, what we don't have. And we just don't take the time to step back and count our blessings and see how fortunate we truly are.
You're absolutely right. I have been having laptop computer issues the last few days, to the point where, because I'm Irish, my Irish temper comes out, but then when I turn around and walk away from those computer issues, and I used to say, wait a second, this will be solved one way or another, and I need to take a deep breath and appreciate the day. And you're right. It's the essence of life is to appreciate the little things.
The book is The Reluctant Donor by Suzanne Ruff. If you'd like more information, you can visit her site, thereluctantdonor.com, or as always, you can visit our site, cyacyl.com. That stands for Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. While on our site, listen to past shows as podcasts, read the digital magazine, sign up for our mailing list, take part in the book club, and be sure to follow the show on Facebook and Twitter. Suzanne, thank you so much for spending time with us today and for bringing to light the important topic of organ donation. As we said, from the start of this interview until now, 2 more people have been added to the organ donation list, and that number grows rapidly. So if you are contemplating it and you're afraid, like we said, go donate blood, get a sense for what it feels like, and see if this is a decision that you can make. Quickly, Suzanne, before we run out of time, what do you want our listeners to remember?
I most would like someone to remember that it's all about life and to cherish life.
Well said, Suzanne. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Joan. It's been my pleasure, and I have to tell you, my mother's name was Joan, so I think she's been a part of this interview.
Oh, I love that. Thank you for telling me that.
You're welcome.
This is Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. I'm JoAnn Herman. Thanks for tuning in.